The sterile air conditioning bites at my skin, but it's not the cold that makes me shiver. It's the thin paper in my hand, heavier than lead. The lawyer across the polished table watches me, his face a careful mask of professional sympathy. Outside the window, the city gleams, oblivious. Inside this room, my world is collapsing. This isn't just a piece of paper. It's a declaration of war, the first shot fired in a battle I never wanted. The ink seems to bleed on the page, spelling out the words that confirm the nightmare. Petition for dissolution. Division of assets. Marital misconduct, it's here. It's real. The fight for everything. The fight against him. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life before felt predictable. Stable. We weren't wealthy, not by any stretch, but we had built something. A comfortable home in the suburbs, 2 cars that mostly worked, and a shared vision of the future. My job wasn't glamorous, accounting for a mid-sized firm, but it was steady, and I was good at it. Meticulous. Every number in its right place. Every decimal point accounted for. That same meticulousness I applied to my savings. For years. Every bonus, every tax return, every spare dollar went into a separate account. My account, labeled simply, future. That future had shape. A small cottage by the coast someday. Travel when we retired. The security of knowing that if anything happened, job loss, medical emergency, we weren't one paycheck away from disaster. It was my safety net, my dream fund, the quiet hum of security beneath the surface of our ordinary lives. He knew about it, of course.
We talked about it.
He'd call it my nest egg, sometimes with pride, sometimes with a hint of teasing envy. He had his own finances, his own investments he was always a bit vague about, startup stuff, angel investing, things that sounded exciting but never seemed to yield much beyond complicated stories. I was the steady one, the saver. He was the ideas man. It worked, or so I thought. We had our roles. I built the foundation, he was supposed to build the castle on top. Our marriage wasn't a fairy tale. There were quiet nights, different schedules, the slow drift that happens after years. But there was comfort, too. Shared history. Laughter over old memories. I believed in the core of it. I believed in him. Or maybe I just believed in the life we had built together, and I didn't look too closely at the cracks. The signs, I see them now, were subtle at first. The late nights that became more frequent. The phone always face down. A new sharpness in his voice when I asked simple questions about his day. I attributed it to stress at work. I was busy too. Life gets demanding. You make allowances. You give the benefit of the doubt because the alternative is too terrifying to contemplate. The first tremor hit like a silent, internal explosion. It wasn't dramatic. No whispered confessions or slammed doors. It was an email notification. A transaction alert from my bank. An unusually large withdrawal from that account. The future account. My stomach plummeted. I clicked on the notification, heart hammering against my ribs. The amount was staggering. More than half the balance. Transferred to an unfamiliar account number. Not one of ours. I remember standing in the kitchen, the phone shaking in my hand, the everyday sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, suddenly alien and distant. It had to be a mistake. A scam? My mind scrambled for logical explanations. I called the bank. The conversation was a blur of security questions and hold music, culminating in a polite, professional voice confirming the transfer. Initiated online, from a device linked to our home network. Authorized with my login credentials. Credentials he knew, of course. We shared everything. Didn't we? My voice was a thin reed when I called him. Did you make a transfer from my savings account? A pause. A beat too long.
Then a sigh. Oh, that. Yeah.
Something came up. An opportunity. Had to move fast. An opportunity? Without telling me?
And.
That much. The number felt obscene spoken aloud. It was years of scrimping, years of saying no to things, years of quiet sacrifice. It's fine.
It'll be fine.
It's a bridge loan, basically. Short term. Huge returns.
You'll see.
It'll double, maybe triple. I did it for us. For us, the words felt like a physical blow. He'd taken my security, my years of careful planning, and gambled it on one of his opportunities. Without asking. Without even a conversation. The seed of betrayal was planted, sharp and cold. But even then, I didn't grasp the full horror. I thought it was reckless, arrogant, foolish. I didn't know it was malicious. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk of anxiety. I checked the account balance obsessively, praying to see a deposit, any sign that his reckless gamble had paid off, or that he'd at least returned what he took. Nothing. His explanations became more evasive, his temper shorter. The opportunity was pending, delayed. More complex than anticipated, the initial shock started to morph into a cold, hard dread. Then came the ring. It wasn't a subtle piece. I saw it first in a photo someone tagged him in on social media, a work event, a blurred background. And there, on a woman's hand clasped casually around his arm, was a rock that seemed to catch all the light in the room. A diamond. Large. Prominent. Too prominent for a casual piece of jewelry. My blood ran cold. I didn't know the woman, but the way she looked at him, the proprietary angle of her hand. I didn't confront him about the photo. Not directly. The dread had curdled into a terrible certainty. The opportunity. The missing money. It wasn't an investment. It was something tangible. Something glittering and heavy. I needed proof. My meticulous nature kicked in, but twisted now into a desperate, painful hunt. I checked credit card statements, bank records, anything I could access. The paper trail was there if you knew where to look. A charge from a high-end jeweler known for engagement rings. Dated just after the withdrawal from my savings account. The amount. It matched, sickeningly. It matched the missing chunk of my future, melted down and recast into a symbol of his new future. With her. The air left my lungs in a whoosh that felt like dying. It wasn't just gone. It wasn't just gambled away. It was given. Given to another woman as a promise of forever, a promise he was still pretending to uphold with me. He hadn't just stolen my money. He'd stolen my reality, replaced it with a grotesque lie, and paid for his fantasy with the years of my labor and sacrifice. This was the true inciting incident, not the withdrawal itself, but the understanding of what the withdrawal was for. It wasn't recklessness. It was calculated cruelty. He had used the very foundation of our shared security to build a new life with someone else. My life savings, my security blanket, my dream fund, it was on her finger. The sheer, audacious malice of it took my breath away. I felt physically ill, my body rebelling against the weight of the betrayal. Confrontation was inevitable, but I waited. I needed to gather myself, to move past the raw, gut-wrenching pain, and find a sliver of the steady, meticulous person I was before this bomb dropped. When I finally spoke to him, my voice was unnervingly calm. I held up the jeweler's charge on the statement, the bank transfer record, the photo. He didn't deny it. Not really. The excuses tumbled out. Midlife crisis, felt trapped, didn't mean to hurt me. He planned to pay it back. It was a mistake. He still loved me. That was the most sickening lie of all. He tried to minimize it, twist it, make it somehow my fault. I hadn't been paying enough attention to him. I was too focused on my work, my savings. My savings. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. He was justifying stealing my future because I had been too focused on building a future. When I mentioned the ring, the woman, his face finally hardened. The pretense of regret vanished, replaced by a defensive anger. She makes me happy, he said, as if that were a valid explanation for theft and infidelity. This marriage has been dead for years. You just didn't want to admit it.
Dead.
My voice rose, cracking. You bled it dry. You took everything I built and spent it on your exit strategy. The argument escalated, ugly and raw. He revealed the full extent of his delusion, talking about their plans, their future. He spoke about the money not as my life savings, but as a resource he had reallocated. His complete lack of remorse for the financial betrayal was almost more shocking than the affair itself. He saw my savings not as mine, accumulated through my work and my plans, but as a communal pot he was entitled to dip into for his own desires. Consequences be damned. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying the conversation, dissecting every word. The pain was a physical weight, crushing. But beneath the pain, something else was starting to stir. A cold, hard anger. Not the hot, wild kind that makes you lash out blindly, but a quiet, simmering rage that settles deep in your bones and makes you dangerous. He thought he could just take what was mine, dismantle my life, and walk away to his new happiness on a path paved with my sacrificed future. He thought wrong. Early struggles meant navigating a world turned upside down. The first step was finding legal counsel. That seemed impossible without the savings. I had to borrow from my retirement fund, a painful choice that felt like another layer of financial self-destruction forced upon me by his actions. Consultations were demoralizing. Lawyers listened sympathetically but outlined the harsh realities. Divorce courts could be unpredictable. Tracing funds could be difficult, especially if they were quickly spent. Marital misconduct could be a factor, but reclaiming specific funds used for a mistress was complicated. Some advised me to just focus on getting a fair split of the remaining marital assets, to cut my losses and move on. Cut my losses? My losses were years of my life, years of careful planning, the very foundation of my security. And he was flaunting it, literally, on someone else's hand. The idea of just walking away, letting him keep the moral and financial spoils of his betrayal, was unthinkable. It felt like letting a thief not only keep the stolen goods, but be rewarded for the audacity of the theft. The early legal steps were frustratingly slow. Filing the initial petition felt like shouting into a void. He hired a lawyer too, one known for aggressive tactics. Their first communication was dismissive, framing my claims as emotional overreactions, downplaying the amount taken, suggesting I was being unreasonable. They proposed a settlement that was insulting, laughably low, barely covering a fraction of what was stolen, while trying to protect his supposed other assets. His behavior outside the legal arena was equally challenging. He moved out, of course, but he was smug, condescending. He seemed to believe his narrative, that I was bitter and crazy, that he was just seeking happiness, and the money was a minor detail. He tried to manipulate mutual friends, spreading his version of events. Some people bought it, or, at least, didn't want to get involved, which felt like another layer of isolation. I felt like I was fighting not just him, but the inertia of a system that seemed more interested in clean breaks than in addressing fundamental injustices. The rising challenges felt like climbing a cliff face while he was above, kicking rocks down at me. The legal fees mounted rapidly. Every discovery request, every motion, every hour billed felt like a physical weight. The money I had borrowed was dwindling. He seemed determined to drag things out, perhaps hoping I would run out of funds or simply emotional energy. His lawyer was relentless, challenging every filing, demanding endless documentation, trying to wear me down. He started hiding assets. Small things at first, moving money between accounts, transferring ownership of minor possessions. But then bigger things. Claims that certain investment accounts had lost value, suspiciously, just as the lawsuit started. That business ventures he was involved in were failing, conveniently, just as I was asking for financial disclosures. His other assets, the ones he'd always been so vague about but hinted were substantial, suddenly seemed to evaporate or become hopelessly entangled in complex, debt-ridden structures. The mistress became a more visible presence. He wasn't trying to hide their relationship anymore. Photos popped up on social media, them on vacation, them at parties, her always wearing the ring, sparkling defiantly. It felt like a deliberate provocation, a way to grind salt in the wound. He wanted me to see what he had bought with my money, what I had lost. She seemed oblivious, or perhaps she didn't care where the money came from, as long as it bought her diamonds and a lifestyle. Her confidence, her public display of happiness with my husband and my money, was a constant, gnawing pain. My emotional state was a roller coaster. Moments of fierce determination were followed by periods of crushing despair. The stress was physical, sleepless nights, loss of appetite, a constant knot of anxiety in my stomach. It felt like I was drowning in a sea of legal documents and emotional turmoil. The life I had built felt like a distant memory, replaced by a relentless, ugly conflict. The low point felt like freefall. My borrowed funds for the lawsuit were almost gone. My lawyer, bless her professionalism, had to gently discuss the possibility of scaling back, focusing only on the absolute essentials, maybe even considering a less favorable settlement just to end the bleeding. The thought of settling, of accepting pennies on the dollar while he walked away, still with his new life, still largely unpunished for the magnitude of his theft and betrayal, was unbearable. But the alternative seemed equally bleak: running out of money, being forced to abandon the lawsuit, leaving him completely victorious. He knew I was struggling. Through his lawyer, he made another offer, even lower this time, coupled with condescending terms about how I should move on and find closure. It wasn't just a financial offer. It was a psychological weapon. A clear message that he believed he had won. He had taken my money, broken my heart, and now he was offering a pittance as a consolation prize, expecting me to gratefully accept defeat. I remember sitting in my quiet, too-large house, staring at the insulting offer, tears streaming down my face. It felt like everything was lost. My savings, my marriage, my future security, maybe even my sense of self. He had taken it all, piece by piece, and I felt powerless to stop him. The betrayal was deeper than I ever imagined, a fundamental assault on my trust, my worth, my very ability to build a stable life. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about proving that he couldn't just do this and get away with it.
But how?
I was at the end of my rope, financially and emotionally. The turning point came in the form of a forgotten box in the back of a closet. I was packing up some of his things, a painful, necessary task. It was a box filled with old business records, things he'd called junk years ago. I almost tossed it, but the meticulous part of me, the accountant, couldn't. I started sifting through it, not expecting anything useful, just going through the motions. And then I found it. Not cash, not hidden bank accounts. Something far more powerful in the context of a legal battle. It was a series of old loan documents, partnership agreements, and correspondence related to a property development he'd been involved in years ago. It looked like a failed venture, buried under layers of corporate jargon and legal clauses. But one document caught my eye, a personal guarantee he had signed years ago for a significant portion of the development's debt. And next to it, recent correspondence, not from his usual business contacts, but from a different set of lawyers. Lawyers representing the original lenders, who were now, quietly, pursuing the personal guarantees after the development had failed spectacularly and the primary borrowers had defaulted. He hadn't mentioned this debt. Not to me, not in his financial disclosures for the lawsuit. It was massive, potentially larger than his reported net worth, even including the assets he was trying to protect. This wasn't an investment opportunity. It was a ticking time bomb of personal liability he was trying desperately to keep hidden. He wasn't hiding assets because they were valuable. He was hiding the debt that made them worthless or, worse, put them at risk of being seized. His whole strategy in the divorce, delaying, claiming assets had lost value, proposing low settlements, was a desperate attempt to conclude the divorce and divide the remaining assets before this other, much larger debt came crashing down on him. He wanted to walk away from our marriage with whatever he could salvage before he was financially ruined by this separate, hidden problem. He planned to start his new life with the Mistress using the money he stole from me, while shielding her from the impending disaster of his real financial situation. My breath hitched. This wasn't just hidden debt. This was the key. This explained everything. His smugness wasn't confidence in winning. It was the desperation of a cornered animal trying to protect his last scraps before the inevitable. He wasn't just a thief. He was a man running from total financial annihilation, trying to use my savings to buy himself a lifeboat and a new partner before his ship sank. I immediately took the box to my lawyer. Her initial reaction was cautious, but as she and her team dug into the documents, her excitement grew. This wasn't just evidence of hidden debt. It was evidence of a systemic failure to disclose, potentially fraudulent representation of his finances in the divorce proceedings, and confirmation that the assets he claimed were valuable were, in reality, likely to be seized or rendered worthless by this prior claim. The ring, bought with my money, was merely a sparkling distraction from the vast, hidden hole in his finances. The strategy shifted dramatically. We wouldn't just fight for the return of my savings and a fair division of disclosed assets. We would expose the hidden debt, demonstrating his true, precarious financial state. This would not only bolster my claim for the return of my stolen funds, arguing he had no right or need to take them given his actual liabilities, but it would also shatter his entire illusion of wealth that he had built for his mistress. The plot twist wouldn't just be about me winning. It would be about revealing that his victory was built on sand, and the tide was coming in to wash it all away. The target was no longer just the money he took, but the lie he was living. The legal process accelerated, the documents from the box providing leverage my lawyer hadn't had before. We filed motions to compel full disclosure regarding the discovered debt, subpoenaed records related to the failed development and the lenders pursuing him, and requested an emergency hearing to address the potential financial misrepresentation. He was blindsided. His lawyer fought back, furious, arguing the documents were irrelevant, protected, ancient history. But the dates were clear, the personal guarantee was undeniable, and the correspondence showed the debt was actively being pursued. His carefully constructed facade began to crack. He became visibly stressed during depositions, his earlier arrogance replaced by nervous tics and evasive answers. He couldn't deny the documents, but he tried to minimize their significance. The climax wasn't a courtroom showdown with dramatic speeches, but a tense, airless mediation session mandated by the court before trial. It was held in a conference room, sterile and neutral, designed for compromise. But I wasn't there for compromise anymore. I was there for a reckoning. My lawyer was sharp, laying out the evidence of the hidden debt, the personal guarantee, the active pursuit by the lenders. She connected it directly to his financial disclosures in our case, highlighting the discrepancies and the potential legal consequences of his misrepresentation. His lawyer was pale. They hadn't fully grasped the extent of what we had found, or perhaps he hadn't fully disclosed it even to them. They kept glancing at him, a silent question in their eyes. He was trapped. He could continue to deny, risk a judge finding him in contempt or worse, and face potential criminal charges for perjury and financial fraud on top of losing the divorce case and facing the original lenders. Or he could concede. The mistress was there. He had brought her, a final, desperate attempt to present a united front, to show me what I was missing out on. She sat beside him, initially looking bored, occasionally checking her phone, her hand resting on his knee, the diamond ring flashing under the fluorescent lights. My lawyer presented the settlement terms. They were harsh, deliberately so. Not just the return of my savings, but interest, compensation for legal fees, a significant portion of the remaining disclosed assets, and a judgment against him for anything else he couldn't immediately produce, ensuring I could pursue him for years. But the real sting was not financial, not directly. It was the clear, unavoidable picture the terms painted of his actual financial state. The terms laid bare the debt, the judgment, the fact that he was not the wealthy man he pretended to be, but a man on the verge of total financial ruin, pursued by other, bigger creditors. My settlement terms were designed to be publicly filed, part of the court record. Anyone, including his mistress, could see the truth. His face crumpled as he read the document. He had been so focused on protecting his image, on escaping our marriage with some semblance of wealth and dignity to impress his new partner. He thought he could sacrifice my security to preserve his. He never imagined I would uncover the depth of his pre-existing ruin and use it to expose him completely. He looked at the terms, then at his lawyer, then at the mistress. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to protest, perhaps to negotiate, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm, a silent warning. The jig was up. The evidence was undeniable. Continuing the fight meant utter catastrophe. Then, the mistress, who had been idly scrolling, looked up. She had probably picked up on the shift in atmosphere, the tension in the room. Maybe she saw the look on his face. She leaned closer to him, whispering, "What's going on? What does that mean?" He didn't answer her. His gaze was fixed on the settlement document, on the numbers that represented not just his financial destruction, but the collapse of the carefully constructed fantasy he'd used to lure her. The debt, the judgments, the lack of any real assets left, it was all there, stark and undeniable. And that's when he screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain, or rage, or even fear. It was a sound ripped from the gut of a man whose entire world had just imploded. A raw, animalistic bellow of pure, unadulterated agony and shock. He screamed my name, then a string of obscenities directed at me, at the lawyers, at the documents. He slammed his fist on the table, making the water glasses jump. The mistress recoiled, startled, staring at him with wide, suddenly horrified eyes. The polished veneer of the successful, charming man she thought she knew shattered in that instant. He wasn't screaming about the money he had to pay me. He was screaming because he realized he had lost everything. The money he took from me was gone. The assets he hoped to protect were forfeit or worthless due to the hidden debt I had uncovered. His reputation was ruined by the exposure of his financial deceit, and in that moment, looking at the expression on the mistress's face, he knew he had lost her too. The ring on her finger, bought with my money, suddenly symbolized the colossal, irreversible mistake he had made. The shock of his scream hung in the air. Security was called, though he didn't get violent, just continued to rant, his face contorted, spitting accusations. The mistress stood up slowly, her eyes darting between him and the documents on the table. She didn't look at me. She looked at the man she thought was her ticket to a secure future and saw a bankrupt, screaming wreck. She mumbled something about needing air and left the room, the diamond on her finger flashing one last, ironic time. She didn't come back. His scream faded into hoarse sobs. He was broken. Utterly, completely broken. Not by my actions alone, but by the cumulative weight of his own lies and recklessness, exposed and amplified by the truth I had unearthed. The plot twist wasn't just my victory, it was his total, unforeseen annihilation. The aftermath was quiet, almost eerily so, after the storm of his breakdown. He signed the settlement agreement, defeated, under the stern gaze of his lawyer and the mediator. There was nothing left for him to fight for. The documents were filed, making his financial collapse a matter of public record. I walked out of the mediation room not with a sense of triumph, but with a heavy, weary relief. Justice, of a kind, had been served. I would get my savings back, eventually, along with compensation. The financial damage he inflicted on me would be repaired. But the emotional damage, the loss of trust, the years wasted, that wasn't so easily quantifiable or fixed. The mistress was gone, of course. A few weeks later, I saw photos of her online without the ring. He tried to contact me, pathetic messages begging, blaming, trying to explain. I blocked him. There was nothing left to say. He was someone else's problem now, or more accurately, his own. The hidden debt I uncovered ensured that even if he found another opportunity, any future earnings would likely be seized by his original creditors. His financial future, like his relationship with the mistress, was over. I got my money back in installments as per the settlement. Seeing the numbers reappear in my account wasn't the triumphant moment I might have imagined. It felt necessary, like retrieving a stolen organ. The account balance grew, a tangible sign of rebuilding. It was still future, but the future felt different now. Wiser. Harder. I learned that the meticulousness I applied to numbers needed to be applied to people too. To trust, to relationships, to the quiet discrepancies you feel in your gut. He taught me a brutal lesson about the cost of blindness, of giving the benefit of the doubt when instinct screams otherwise. I'm still rebuilding. Not just financially, but emotionally. The scar tissue is there. Trust doesn't come easily now. But the fear is gone. He didn't get away with it. He thought he could use me, discard me, and build a glittering new life on the ruins of mine. Instead, his own foundation of lies crumbled, leaving him with nothing. My future is back in my hands now, a little bruised, a little delayed, but mine. And that, in itself, is a victory. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version in the comments. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.